Today I want to discuss a stressful subject, stress, and how to cope with stress effectively and positively. Believe it or not, there are 4 ways to do that, and all of them were discovered by Welsh Germans. My name is Sam Vaknin. I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited, the first book ever on narcissistic abuse, and I'm also a stressless professor of psychology in several very stressing and stressful universities. Okay, Shoshanim. We are talking about the work by Schwarzer and Knoll in 2003. Schwarzer and Knoll propose that there are 4 ways to cope with stress, which are essentially positive. They tackle the stress, get rid of it somehow, or transform it into positive energy, and they do this in a way that doesn't create dissonance, doesn't actually end up adding stress. So the first strategy is anticipatory coping. Anticipatory coping is a stress management strategy, and in this strategy one seeks to avoid problems or minimize problems associated with a critical event that is occurring in the near future and that involves potential risk. In other words, it's a form of minimizing catastrophizing. So we're all faced with such events: a scheduled public speech, a job interview, a date with a meaningful other, an exam, a promotion, coping with your adolescent children. I mean, we all face repeatedly and consistently with events, and we know that we're going to react with stress to these events. They're stressful. And so anticipatory management requires us to minimize these problems or to somehow avoid them. And how to do that? It's the management of known risks. It involves efforts to solve the actual problems. And that is the distinction, the difference between ruminating and worrying. Ruminating is when you're focused on the problem, but never on the solutions. Whereas worrying is when you're focused on the solutions while minimizing or somehow tackling the problem. The idea when you worry is to solve the problem. The idea when you ruminate is to revisit the problem time and again, to regurgitate it. And so getting rid of catastrophizing and getting rid of rumination, understanding how to manage known risks, how to solve actual problems, that's at the core of anticipatory management, the management strategy under the Schwarzer-Knoll system. They suggest to increase effort, to enlist the help of other people, to invest in resources, or to force yourself to feel good in spite of the risks. For example, by redefining the situation as less threatening, by distracting yourself, by gaining assurance from others. This strategy is assumed to increase with middle and old age and is one of 4 types of coping proposed by these German psychologists. As we grow older, as we mature, we tend to adopt this strategy almost instinctively and reflexively. The next type of strategy is known as reactive coping. It involves efforts to deal with a past or present stressful situation. For example, divorce, marital dissolution, losing one's job, some kind of life crisis. And you do that by compensating for or accepting the associated harms and losses. You make a list. You say to yourself, I'm going to divorce, I'm going to lose my job. This is what's going to happen. These are the risks, these are the dangers, these are the damages. And then somehow the next question should be how to compensate for all these. And if you can't compensate for these, then how to accept them. Acceptance is a major healer, major component of healing. And in almost all situations, you can always compensate. There's always a compensation if you just put your mind to it. Reactive coping involves efforts to readjust goals, to find benefits, or to search for meaning. Reframing the imminent looming crisis often converts it from doom and gloom to an opportunity. This is one of 4 types of coping proposed by, I remind you, the German psychologists Ralf Schwarzer and Knoll. And reactive coping is problem-focused, emotion-focused, or social relations-focused. The next type of coping is preventive coping. Again, it's a stress management strategy. It's a strategy that involves preparing for possible events in the long term by building up resources and reserves to help to minimize the severity of the inevitable impact. As I said, acceptance is a crucial component, a crucial key. You don't fight the inevitable, you prepare for it. That's my criticism of climate change warriors. Climate change is inevitable. Fighting it only increases stress. We need to learn to adapt. Examples of events that may or may not occur in the distant future include job loss, forced retirement, crime, illness, poverty, and worse. And the perceived ambiguity stimulates a broad range of behaviors that are intended to accentuate one's psychological strengths and accumulate wealth, social capital and bonding, skills, just in case. It's a just in case strategy, not just in time strategy. So if you maintain a savings account, if you lock the doors when you're away from home, if you carry health insurance, these are all effectively preventive strategies. Preventive coping is not born out of an acute stress situation, but rather it's a reasonable concern about the inherent hazards, risks, and dangers in daily life and daily living. And finally, there's proactive coping. It reflects efforts to build up resources that facilitate promotion towards challenging goals and personal growth. Proactive individuals are motivated to meet challenges. They commit themselves to their own high standards. They see demands and opportunities in the distant future, and they initiate a constructive path of action towards meeting these demands and challenges, and even obstacles. This preparation reduces anxiety. This preparation is anxiolytic, it reduces stress. The very act of preparation restores a sense of mastery and control. Stress is interpreted as eustress, that is, productive arousal, vital energy. And coping becomes goal management instead of risk management. And so, in contrast to the other 3 types of coping proposed by Schwarzer and Knoll, proactive coping does not arise from any negative appraisals. There's no anticipation of harm and loss or threat. On the very contrary, there's the belief that you can convert any contingency, any vicissitude, any exigency, any challenge, any obstacle or hurdle, any mishap, you can convert them into something positive. Eustress is the positive stress response. Eustress involves optimal levels of stimulation, kind of stress that results from challenging but unattainable but attainable and enjoyable or worthwhile tasks. So if you force yourself to participate in an athletic event or to give a speech, you are actually creating eustress. Eustress has a beneficial effect by generating a sense of fulfillment, accomplishment, control, mastery, and it facilitates growth, development, and high levels of performance. It is the exact opposite of distress. Eustress was first described by the Hungarian-born Canadian endocrinologist Hans Selye. And so the coping strategies of Schwarzer and Knoll actually aim to convert distress to eustress. And if you do that on a regular basis, engage in all four strategies, prepare yourself, reframe the situation, you will discover that you are a lot less worried, a lot less stressed, a lot less anxious, a lot more energized, and a lot more ready to take on the world. The way children do when they separate, individuate at age 2 or 3 years old. They leave mommy behind, and it's extremely stressful. It's terrifying. And yet they venture forward. They venture forth to explore and discover the world. Takes a bit of grandiosity, of course, but this is the kind of narcissism that is healthy.